They told me I had 30 days to pay $15,000, or I'd lose my grandfather's farm. But the moment I started digging into what was really happening, I realized this was never about money. It was about greed, power, and a plan so dirty it was about to blow up our entire town. And what happened next still doesn't feel real. I never thought leaving my old life behind would drop me straight into a battle I never asked for. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and 6 months ago I was a high-powered corporate lawyer in Chicago, living the life everyone said I was supposed to want. Great salary. Fancy office. Respect. But after I lost my husband, David, to cancer, that perfect life fell dead. My teenage daughter, Emma, was falling apart. She barely spoke to me. And I was working 16-hour days just so I wouldn't have to go home and sit in that quiet house filled with memories. Then the letter arrived. My grandfather, Joe, had passed away. And he left me his 50-acre farm just outside Meadowbrook, a small town 2 hours from the city. I hadn't been there since I was 12. But I still remembered those summers like they happened yesterday, running through the cornfields, riding horses for the first time, and sitting on the porch while Grandpa Joe told me stories about how our family fought to keep that land. He bought it in 1945 after coming back from the war. He built everything himself. Every fence post. Every barn beam. Every inch of that farm had his sweat in it. The decision felt insane, but Emma and I were desperate. We needed a reset. A new start. Somewhere we could breathe again. So I quit my job, packed up our whole life into a moving truck, and drove straight toward the one place that still felt like home. When we pulled in, my heart dropped. The farmhouse looked worse than I remembered. Paint peeling off the walls. Porch sagging like it might collapse. Fields overgrown like they hadn't been touched in years. But standing there, breathing in that country air, something hit me hard. For the first time in years, I felt hope. And Emma, who barely said 10 words during the entire drive, actually smiled when she saw the old barn. That alone made the move worth it. That first week, we worked nonstop. Cleaning, painting, clearing weeds, fixing what we could. And at night, we talked about what the farm could become. Maybe an organic farm. Maybe a quiet life. Maybe a place where we could finally grieve without the city screaming around us every day. I was spending the last of our savings, but for once, it felt like the right choice. Then on day 8, everything collapsed. A certified letter showed up in the mailbox. The return address made no sense. The Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. I froze. An HOA? My grandfather never mentioned anything like that. I opened the envelope and felt my stomach twist. The letter was cold, stiff, and threatening. It said our property owed $15,000 in back dues and fees. And we had 30 days to pay in full, or they would take legal action. Foreclosure. Eviction. My hands literally started shaking as I reread it. This had to be a scam. Our farm had been in the family for 80 years, long before any HOA even existed. I glanced at Emma. She had been laughing just minutes earlier. Now she was staring at me, her face tense, her eyes full of fear. I forced a smile and told her not to worry, that it was probably some mistake and I'd handle it. But inside? That old lawyer instinct kicked in. Because something about this didn't feel like a mistake. It felt planned. I spent the next 2 days researching the Meadowbrook HOA, and what I uncovered made my blood boil. The association had only been created 5 years ago, mainly for the new suburban housing developments popping up around our town. But every record I found showed the same thing. Our farm wasn't even inside town limits. It was clearly outside HOA jurisdiction. So why were they coming after my land? That's when I decided I wasn't going to sit at home and wait for them to take everything. I went to their next board meeting. The community center was packed with people. Most of them looked angry. Some looked scared. And I could feel the tension in the room before anyone even spoke. At the front tables sat 5 board members. But it was obvious only one person mattered. Richard Thornton, the HOA president. He looked about 50, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my entire kitchen renovation. His hair was slicked back perfectly, like he'd stepped out of a real estate commercial. And his smile? It was the kind of smile that looked friendly, but didn't feel human. When open comments started, I raised my hand. Thornton's smile widened like he'd been waiting for me. I introduced myself and calmly explained that my property couldn't owe HOA dues because it existed long before the association and wasn't even inside their boundaries. The room went dead silent. Then Thornton casually picked up a remote and clicked a button. A map appeared on the screen behind him. "Miss Mitchell," he said smoothly, "we recently conducted a full boundary survey and revision." He pointed to the map. "Your property now falls within our expanded jurisdiction." I stared at the screen. My farm was outlined like it had been targeted. Thornton continued, still calm, still smiling. "The previous owner, your grandfather, was notified multiple times, but refused to respond. Those dues have been accumulating, along with late fees and administrative costs. It's all completely legal, I assure you." I could feel heat rushing up my neck. My grandfather was 89. He died from a stroke. He probably never even saw those letters. And even if he did, how could they just expand boundaries to swallow up private land that had been independent for decades? I spoke up, my voice sharper now. "You can't just redraw a line and claim someone's property." That's when Thornton's smile finally dropped. Just for a second. And in that moment I saw it. This man wasn't surprised. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't confused. He was annoyed, like I was ruining his schedule. He leaned forward. "The boundary adjustments were properly filed with the county and approved by this board," he said. "You're welcome to review the documentation. But the debt stands." Then he paused, letting the room feel the threat. 30 days, Miss Mitchell. I suggest you start making arrangements." My chest tightened. Not because I was scared, but because I suddenly realized this wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. As the meeting dragged on, I couldn't stop staring at the map still glowing behind him. And then I saw something that made my stomach turn. Right beside my property, in tiny print, were words that didn't belong there. Future Development Zone 3. Luxury Estates. Luxury estates? On my grandfather's farm? I quietly pulled out my phone and snapped a photo before anyone noticed. When the meeting ended, I walked out fast, trying to keep my face calm. But my mind was racing. In the parking lot, an older man approached me. He looked worn down, like life had been punching him for years. "You're Joe's granddaughter," he said. I nodded. He stuck out his hand. "I'm Tom Henderson. I live 3 properties down." Then he lowered his voice. "That man in there, he's coming after me too." I blinked. Tom shook his head like he couldn't believe it himself. "He claims my house doesn't meet standards. Threatens me with liens. Threatens me with lawyers. And I'm not the only one." He leaned closer. "There are others. We need to talk." I looked back toward the community center. And there, through the window, I saw Richard Thornton standing perfectly still. Watching us. Not talking. Not moving. Just staring. And suddenly I knew it. This was never about HOA dues. This was about forcing people out. Taking land. And building something that didn't belong here. And somehow, I had walked right into the center of it. Tom Henderson became my first ally in a fight I still didn't fully understand. And as we sat later at my kitchen table over coffee, he told me exactly who he was. A 72-year-old Air Force veteran. 6 months ago, the HOA started coming after him nonstop with violation notices. His mailbox was the wrong color. His grass was a/4 tall. His fence supposedly needed to be replaced. Every single violation came with a fine. And when he couldn't pay, they threatened liens against his property. "I did some digging," Tom said, sliding a folder across my table. It was thick, packed with paperwork. "Thornton owns Summit Development Corporation." My stomach tightened. In the last 3 years, he's bought 8 properties around here," Tom continued. "And it always happens the same way. The HOA crushes the owners with fees and violations until they give up. Then Thornton buys the land cheap, bulldozes the house, and builds luxury homes. He sells them for huge profits." My lawyer instincts immediately snapped into place. "That's a clear conflict of interest," I said. "He's using his power as HOA president to target land for himself." Tom nodded slowly. "Yeah, but proving it is another story," he said. "He's careful. On paper, everything looks legal. And most people around here can't afford lawyers to fight him." I swallowed hard. Because I knew exactly what he meant. I could fight him, or at least I used to be able to. But my savings were disappearing fast. Still, I had my legal training. And I had something stronger than money. I had determination. Emma had been standing quietly in the doorway, listening. For the first time, she spoke up. "We should tell people," she said. "Like everyone. If he's doing this to you and Mr. Henderson, he's probably doing it to other families too." She was right. We didn't just need evidence. We needed numbers. Over the next week, Tom introduced me to 5 other homeowners who were being targeted by the HOA. There was Maria, a single mother of 3, who got cited for growing vegetables in her front yard. Apparently it violated HOA aesthetic standards. Then there were the Johnsons, an elderly couple facing thousands in fines because their home's siding was unapproved. Every story sounded the same. Impossible rules. Endless fines. And Thornton always watching, waiting, circling. Emma, smart and furious, created a social media page called Meadowbrook Fights Back. She posted our stories. She posted the photo I took of Thornton's development map. She posted proof of his company's property purchases. Within 48 hours, we had 3,000 followers. Then the messages started flooding in. Then the news outlets started calling. I watched my daughter, who had been silent and broken for months, standing in front of a local reporter, speaking with fire in her voice. Grief had almost destroyed both of us. But this fight was giving her something I couldn't. Purpose. And the town started waking up. Local farmers brought food, supplies, and tools. A retired lawyer named Patricia Chin offered free legal help. Strangers showed up at our farm asking what they could do. People who didn't even know my grandfather were suddenly willing to stand beside us. But I wasn't naive. I knew Richard Thornton wouldn't let this happen quietly. Men like him never did. I just didn't understand how far he was willing to go, until it almost destroyed us. Thornton's revenge came fast. And it came hard. 3 days after Emma's page went viral, a county inspector showed up at our door. He had a clipboard and a look on his face like he didn't want to be there. He walked through the farmhouse and started listing problems. Then he handed me the report. 17 building code violations. Electrical issues. Structural damage. Water contamination risks. Some were real problems you'd expect from an 80-year-old farmhouse. But most of it was ridiculous. Nitpicky nonsense. Still, every violation came with mandatory repairs. The total cost? More than $40,000. "You've got 60 days to bring everything up to code," the inspector said, refusing to meet my eyes. "Or the property will be condemned." I recognized that look instantly. A man following orders he didn't believe in. Then, 2 days later, our well water tested positive for contamination. The health department ordered us to stop using it immediately. Tom and I went out to check the well. And that's when he spotted it. Fresh drill marks near the wellhead. My heart dropped. Someone had tampered with it. Someone had poisoned our water. But proving it? Impossible. Then the anonymous complaints started pouring into the county office. They said our dog was running loose and terrorizing neighbors. Our dog, who barely left the porch. They claimed we were operating an illegal business without permits. Then it got worse. They accused us of running a puppy mill. Disturbing the peace. Breaking zoning laws. Every complaint triggered an investigation. Every investigation drained our time, our energy, and our hope. And every report went into a file. A file Thornton's lawyers could use like a weapon. Then Patricia Chin called me. Her voice was shaky. "Sarah, I have bad news." I gripped the phone tighter. "Thornton filed for an emergency injunction," she said. "He's claiming your property is a public health hazard." My chest tightened. "He's asking the court to place it in receivership pending payment of all dues and completion of all code violations." I could barely breathe. "If the judge grants it," she continued, "you could lose the farm before we even make it to trial." Then she paused. And when she spoke again, her voice sounded defeated. "And Sarah, my firm is pressuring me to drop your case." I froze. "They're saying Thornton does too much business in this county. I'm sorry, but I can't risk my partnership." The line went quiet, and I felt everything collapsing around me. Our legal money was gone. The repairs would cost more than I could ever afford. And the one person helping us was being forced to walk away. Emma overheard enough to understand. She ran to her room and started crying. That night, I sat alone on the porch. The same porch where Grandpa Joe used to sit with me in the summer. The same spot where he'd tell me stories and make me feel safe. And for the first time since David died, I completely broke down. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery. I sat beside Grandpa Joe's grave holding the old journals I found in the attic. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I opened one. Then I saw an entry dated 1967. And the words hit me like a punch. "The bank tried to foreclose today during the drought. They said the land wasn't worth keeping. But this land doesn't just feed the body, it feeds the soul. Whatever challenges come, I'll remember. Roots that go deep can weather any storm. You don't give up on family, and you don't give up on home." I stared at the page. My eyes burned. And suddenly, I realized something. This wasn't the first time someone tried to steal this land. And Grandpa Joe didn't back down then. I wiped my tears, drove back to the farm, and the moment I turned onto our driveway, I froze. Because what I saw didn't make any sense. There were over 200 people gathered in our front field. Tables were being unfolded. Tents were going up. Someone was building a stage. It looked like a full event was happening on my land. For a second, I honestly thought I was hallucinating. Then I saw Tom standing in the middle of it all, holding a megaphone, smiling like he just pulled off the greatest prank of his life. "Surprise!" he shouted. "Welcome to the first annual Meadowbrook Harvest Festival and Fundraiser." I just stood there, completely speechless. Before I could even say a word, Emma ran past me. She threw her arms around Maria's kids, who were holding handmade signs that read, "Save Sarah's Farm." Local farmers had brought fresh produce to sell, and every dollar was going straight to our legal defense. A bluegrass band was tuning their instruments near the stage. News crews were already filming. And somehow, someone had even organized a silent auction with donated items from local businesses. It wasn't just support. It was a full-scale movement. Tom walked up beside me and put his arm around my shoulder. "You helped us find our voices," he said quietly. "Now we're helping you fight." I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. That day, we raised $37,000. Enough to hire a real legal team. Enough to start serious repairs. But even more important than the money, we sent Richard Thornton a message loud and clear. Sarah Mitchell wasn't alone. And this town wasn't going to be bullied anymore. The court hearing came 2 weeks later. Thornton's lawyers showed up sharp, confident, and ready for war. They laid out binders filled with paperwork, boundary revisions, notification records, and every legal detail they could dig up. They painted me like I was just a stubborn outsider who refused to pay my fair share. But this time, I wasn't walking in alone. Our new lawyer, James Park, a civil rights attorney from the city, was prepared. He didn't get emotional. He didn't raise his voice. He just started laying out the truth piece by piece. First, he presented the original surveys proving our land was outside HOA jurisdiction. Then he showed the records proving the so-called boundary expansion was never properly voted on by HOA members. It wasn't approved by the community. It wasn't debated. It wasn't even discussed. It was forced through by executive decision, by Thornton alone. Then came the moment that changed everything. James dropped the final evidence. The bombshell. Messages between Thornton and other board members, obtained through discovery. And in black and white, they openly discussed ways to pressure homeowners into giving up land in resistance zones. I saw Thornton's face tighten for the first time. But what happened next was even bigger. The courtroom doors opened, and Patricia Chin walked in. My heart stopped. She walked forward calmly and looked at the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to testify." She had been subpoenaed by our legal team. And even though her firm had pressured her to stay quiet, she refused. She told the court that Thornton had approached her privately. He offered her a fast track to partnership if she dropped my case. And he threatened her career if she didn't. The room went silent. Then our private investigator took the stand. And he presented financial records proving Thornton had personally profited over $2 million from forced property acquisitions in the past 3 years. Always using the exact same method. Target a property. Create violations. Force the sale. Develop luxury housing. Collect the profit. Judge Martinez, a stern woman with a sharp stare, slowly removed her glasses and looked directly at Thornton. "Mr. Thornton," she said, "this court takes a very dim view of anyone using civic authority for personal enrichment." Thornton didn't blink. But his hands tightened on the table. "I am granting an immediate injunction against all HOA actions regarding Ms. Mitchell's property pending a full investigation." The words hit like thunder. Outside the courthouse, our supporters exploded in cheers. Emma live-streamed the entire thing. Within hours, it went viral. By the next day, state officials announced a formal investigation into HOA corruption. And as I stood there, exhausted and shaking, I finally felt relief. But then something else hit me too. Winning in court wasn't the finish line. It was only the beginning. Because now we had to rebuild. And rebuilding was going to be harder than fighting. 3 months later, the final verdict came down. Judge Martinez ruled clearly that our property was outside HOA jurisdiction. She dismissed all liens and dues. And she referred Thornton to the state attorney general for a fraud investigation. The Meadowbrook HOA was dissolved. A new community board was elected, with Tom Henderson chosen as president. Within weeks, Thornton's development company filed for bankruptcy. 4 board members resigned in disgrace. The town celebrated. But for me, the victory felt strange. Because the farm was saved. But I was broke. I was exhausted. And deep down, I didn't know if I could keep going. The repairs were done, but maintaining 50 acres while raising a teenager felt impossible. I started looking at job listings back in Chicago. I told myself maybe we had tried. Maybe we had fought hard. Maybe this rural dream was never meant to last. Then one afternoon, Tom, Maria, and a dozen community members showed up at my door. And they weren't there to celebrate. They were there with a plan. Tom stepped forward first. "What if we turn this place into something bigger?" he asked. "A community cooperative farm. A place where families can learn sustainable agriculture, grow food, and reconnect with the land." He looked around at the others. "You provide the space and the knowledge. We provide the labor and resources. Everyone benefits." I didn't even have time to answer. Because Emma's face lit up. And I hadn't seen that look in her eyes since before David died. "Mom, yes," she said. "We could teach kids about farming. Have workshops. Maybe partner with schools." She turned to the group, excited. "This is what Grandpa would have wanted. The land helping people." And she was right. Grandpa Joe never farmed just for himself. He always shared what he grew. He taught neighbor kids how to ride horses. He believed land was meant to bring people together. So we said yes. Over the next 6 months, we built something incredible. Families rented small plots to grow their own food. We held workshops on composting, beekeeping, and organic farming. Emma started a youth program focused on environmental responsibility. Tom organized veteran support groups that met at the farm, where men who had seen war found peace working the soil. The old barn was transformed into a community center. The fields filled with different crops. And the silence that once haunted the farm was replaced by laughter. Children running. Families talking. Life. And somewhere along the way, I found something I never expected. A new kind of law practice. I started helping small farmers and homeowners fight back against corporate abuse. I took on cases no one else would touch. I did pro bono work for people who couldn't afford justice. And for the first time since David died, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. One spring morning, Emma and I stood near the farmhouse planting an oak tree in Grandpa Joe's memory. Emma was taller now. Stronger. Confident. She was even talking about studying environmental law. "Dad would have loved this," she said softly. I pulled her close. Tears streamed down both our faces. But this time, it wasn't grief. It was gratitude. We fought for this land. And we won. But more than that, we learned something bigger. The deepest roots build the strongest future. And sometimes, when you think you're losing everything, you finally discover what truly matters. Because home isn't just a place. It's the people you fight for. And the community you build.